Hello guys, Crispy here, welcome back to another video. In this one, my friends, I'm gonna be testing a GeForce GTX 1660 Super 6GB GPU in Forza Horizon 5. This one is the HP OEM version of the card. We are running it with the latest Nvidia drivers, and I'm not manually overclocking it. You can see all of its specs right here in Tech Power Up's GPU Z. Again, it has 6GB of GDDR6 memory, and over on the left, we're pairing it with the i5 13600K overclocked to 5.5 GHz. You'll get the same FPS if you pair it with like Ryzen 5 3600. You don't need as beefy of a CPU, of course, to not bottleneck it. And I'm also pairing it with 32GB of DDR5 6000 MHz RAM in dual channel. Let's get into it, shall we? Let's go over the settings first. I'm playing at 1080p resolution, and we're also going to test 1440p, 4K, and 8K resolutions. Yes, my friends, 8K on a 1660 Super. It's going to be fun. Down here, we're using MSAA 2x, which is the default in this game. If you disable it, it actually looks like you're running at a lower resolution than your native, so I'll keep this enabled. And TAA is turned off because it actually is slightly more intensive than MSAA 2x in this game alone. Down in the resolution scaling settings, everything is turned off, and I'm not going to be testing these because, well, they're not needed, really. And in Forza Horizon 5, they don't really work as well as they do in other games, like with huge FPS boosts, for example. And here we're starting with the high settings preset, and I'm also gonna test it with Ultra. Let's get into it, finally, okay? So we got our Bugatti out right here with the GT710 for the win plate. That's beautiful, and it's getting very high FPS indeed. Like, look at that, 130 frames per second on average at the moment. That's kind of insane for a 1660 Super, isn't it? And VRAM usage is also very much under control at under 4 GB right now. So yeah, after seeing these results, of course this is not really a very intensive area, we're gonna get there, but after seeing 100 plus FPS basically at 1080p high, I believe even at 1440p and maybe 4K, it will do a decent job on high settings. I wouldn't really lower it down from high settings, by the way, because medium starts looking pretty rough. High is a decent balance if you really require very high FPS, but I think the jump from high to ultra is kind of insane in terms of visuals. You know, it does look very, very good. Okay, let's make this jump over here. There we go. That's huge. Okay, let's take a look at the festival area right there. 120s, 110s. All right, all good. All right, finally in the city area, and it's dropping into the lower 100s, but it's still not dropping from it, which is very, very good. So if you have a high refresh rate monitor, guys, and you want to pick up Forza Horizon 5 or the 1660 Super in the used market, well, it's a good GPU for this game indeed. And I'm especially surprised about that low VRAM utilization, especially after seeing recent titles. Finally, down into the 80s at the end of that little tunnel there, which is the most intensive area by far in the entire game. So not a problem, it's always going to be a buttery smooth experience. So let's bump it up to 1440p resolution, same 2x MSAA, again, it just looks like native with 2x in this game, and same high settings preset. Let's go, start counting our FPS, and it's still close to 100 frames per second. That's magnificent to see, my friends. Look at how well optimized this game is. I mean, it's not fantastic looking, especially at high settings, but it's decent enough in my opinion, and you can enjoy very high frame rates even at 1440p with a 1660 Super. This game came out in 2021, I think. Yeah, pretty sure it did. Oh boy, Jesus, these flips, guys. You know what? Maybe I'm the best driver around. It's not everybody that can do flips with Bugattis. But yeah, the game is quite recent, it looks great, and the optimization is just amazing. The developers from 2023 should take notes. They aren't, clearly, but they definitely should, because there are tons of titles that are coming out this year that are so terribly optimized that you might think that the 1660 Super is now a 1080p low settings card, or even a 720p low settings card. Anyway, getting out of the tunnel, we got 69 FPS, that's the minimum. Guys, you know what? I would play like this. These are the perfect settings. I could end the video right now. So let's go up to 4K. Keep this disabled, thank you. And 4K high settings with the 2x MSAA setting, which, again, I am using a 4K monitor and it just looks like native resolution to me in other games. But here it gets really, really aliased if you disable MSAA, and it only increases FPS slightly, so yeah, just use that on the default setting. But yeah, as you can see, guys, this is pretty decent. It's not 60 plus FPS all of the time, unfortunately. Maybe if you overclock the GPU, it would get 60 average, or maybe if I just benchmarked it in another area that wasn't as intensive as this one, it would actually get 60 on average. But I mean, it's still a playable experience for sure, isn't it? And it's not really stuttering, it's not going out of VRAM or running out of VRAM. It's below 5 gigabytes of VRAM usage. That's crazy. We have so much worse textures these days in games that consume like 10 gigabytes of VRAM, you know, on low settings. For example, Last of Us, when it came out. Right now it's been fixed, thankfully. But yeah, those textures used to consume like 8 gigs on low settings. That's crazy. And by the way, it only drops into the 40s here. This is pretty playable still, especially on a G-Sync monitor. But yeah, The Last of Us Part 1 textures were just terrible, and they did max out the GTX 1660 Super in terms of VRAM at low settings at 1080p resolution. It can't really get 60 plus FPS at those settings either, so yeah, you actually need upscaling, like tons of other titles these days, for them to be playable at 1080p low settings on a 1660 Super, which is crazy, because here we are playing a good-looking game at 45 plus FPS the entire time with close to 60 on average and at 4K resolution. Also, apparently the water is pretty intensive as well. Look at that. Oh, I just love when I get out of the water in this game, by the way, and I'm playing at 4K res. Gotta go there again. But the top of the car gets filled with little droplets of water. Look at that. Look at, it's so detailed. It's so pretty. Oh boy. Okay, it's gone again. But yeah, it's really, really detailed and gorgeous. So let's stop it there, guys. And now let's make bad things happen, okay? So far, it's been a pretty good experience, even at 4K resolution, but we gotta test it out at 8K as well, which is a terrible idea. Can I even apply the settings, guys? Please? I'm pressing... I'm also gonna press enter. No, oh, I heard something. I heard something. Did it apply? I think so. Oh boy. I think we need to play at like low or very low settings for 8K, because of course we're running out of VRAM heavily right now. At this point, I'm not really sure how I can get out of this. I just want to change the settings or maybe increase the size of this. Both things. They are impossible to do. Oh boy, finally we're here, guys. Oh yes, can I start the car? No? I don't think it's working. I don't know why the camera is moving. I've been pressing W for like 5 seconds or more, actually. The car is moving, yes, but I can't hear the car working still. Okay, it's starting now. Oh boy. Oh, it was loading the sun. The light of the sun, I guess. So this is the experience at 8K high settings, guys. I guess nobody expected it to be great aside from me for some reason. I'm stupid sometimes. Okay, so I'm gonna Alt F4 because I think it's gonna be easier to change the settings in the pre-game menu or whatever. So we're at 7680 by 4320. I disabled MSAA this time because we need every bit of FPS that we can get, and we're using the very low settings presets, which are the lowest settings in this game. And look at that. It is now playable. VRAM usage at 5.5, 5.6 at the moment. I'm not sure if it has already swapped some things into the RAM, but it's stable so far, you know, and it's getting us 30 frames per second at times with some drops into the 20s, which is pretty bad, of course. But yeah, I could say I'm a little bit impressed this time around, especially after seeing 0 FPS previously. We're just gonna fast travel over here to the city because I don't really want to play with these FPS. Yeah, this weather is actually very similar to the weather outside my house at the moment. All right, anyway. That doesn't matter. Let's start counting our FPS. Whoop, starting to get some low video memory warnings up there. So it's achieving 5.8 gigabytes at the moment, or 5.7. That was terrible. What am I even doing? Now, of course, 8K res is only reserved for things like the 3090, 3090 Ti, and 4090. Maybe like the 7900 XT and the XTX as well. Those GPUs should be very capable of achieving a playable experience at 8K. Everything else doesn't really have the VRAM needed for it, especially at like ultra or extreme settings. Of course, at lower settings, you can actually get by at 8K resolution with weaker cards. As I told you, 1080 Ti did a decent enough job. So did my 3080 Ti and my 4080. But yeah, as you can see, well, even at the very low settings, it's not possible to play at 8K with the 1660 Super. So we're back to the reasonable 1080p resolution. I'm gonna enable 2x MSAA, and we're using the Ultra settings preset this time around, alright? Okay, here we have it, guys. It's raining at the moment, so I guess it gets a little bit lower FPS than it would with sunny weather, but it's getting way lower FPS than it did at high settings, isn't it? We got like 130 FPS on average at this point in the video on high settings and 1080p resolution, and now we're getting 76. That's a huge drop-off in performance, but as I told you, it's also looking way better. But yeah, guys, if you don't require that high refresh rate experience, which I don't really require that in Forza Horizon 5. I'd be perfectly happy with 60 FPS flat all of the time. You can play like this. Ultra settings still works flawlessly, although our VRAM usage is close to maxed out. Look at that. I guess if we played for about like 20 minutes here on Ultra settings, we would start seeing those warning signs. But the good thing is, even if those happen every now and again, and you can disable them in the menu, it doesn't really hinder the experience because it won't really start stuttering because of the VRAM being maxed out slightly. So it's gonna stay pretty smoothly throughout the gameplay. Over here, as you can see, seeing some cars with the rainy weather as well. It's not raining anymore, but with some very nice water effects on the road and reflections and so on. I like that. And it still hasn't dropped from 60 frames per second. 1% lows are at 63. It's pretty good, guys. It is actually pretty good. I guess it is gonna drop from 60 FPS here inside of the tunnel. Not yet, though. Okay, there we go. Getting out of the tunnel drops us into the low 50s, but that's only a little slowdown that's gonna happen very rarely throughout your gameplay session, unless you really like tunnels and you spend all of your time inside of them. Now the thing is, when you go up to 1440p, things will definitely get rougher. You know, we were already close to the 60s sometimes at 1080p, so I believe this is going to provide a very similar experience to what 4K high gave us in terms of performance. But hey, if you have that 1440p monitor and you don't really care much about the drops into the 50s sometimes, it's still gonna be a playable experience in Forza Horizon 5 on ultra settings. How many games since 2020 can you say that your 1660 Super runs them at 50 plus FPS, 1440p ultra settings? Not many, right? This is very good optimization, and it looks very good once again at the same time. Now, it does drop into the 40s, as you can see, getting out of the tunnel especially, 44. That's so similar to the results that we got at 4K high, actually. It's really, really close to that same experience. Of course, here we are actually running out of VRAM, you know, because it already swapped some things into the RAM. RAM usage slightly higher than it was at the 1080p resolution, yes, but again, that doesn't mean that it will start stuttering like crazy like newer games do. It just means that you will have some warning messages sometimes, and that can get a bit annoying, but again, you can disable them. So you can play at 1440p absolutely fine. I think 59 FPS average in a city area. That means that outside of the city it will get even higher. And that's great. Let's go up to 4K resolution. Should we disable that? I mean, it won't really make that much of a difference. I'm going to show you. We're getting 42 frames per second without any more cars on screen. And I'm gonna... That's pretty good, by the way, for 4K Ultra, isn't it? And I'm gonna disable the MSAA. And without the MSAA enabled, we got 3 more FPS. If it was any other title, like, for example, Red Dead Redemption 2, we'd get, like, 20 less FPS. But here it's negligible. So I'm gonna go back to it. Actually, TAA also looks really good here at 4K resolution. But let's go with MSAA. It seems like most people do like MSAA the best, even though the TAA implementation in this game is awesome. So let's go. It's starting to have some little stutters here and there. Even when we were just standing there, it was stuttering a bit, probably because of the VRAM being completely maxed out at this point, and it's swapping many things into the RAM. But after you swap them, I guess it's gonna be okay, because right now we're getting 30 FPS, 1% lows, and it's kind of stable. It's not having massive spikes anymore in that frame time graph. And in the tunnel, we can... Oh my god, so sorry. Inside of the tunnel, we can get 30 FPS. 30 minimum, actually, getting out of it. That's insane. So even at 4K Ultra settings, if you want a 30 FPS experience, maybe add a little bit of motion blur to disguise the fact that it's so choppy, you know, you can actually play pretty well. Right now, inside of many of these bushes, it actually drops your FPS like crazy, or at least the frame time graph goes all over the place, as you can see. Huge spikes, and it drops into the 20s at times. So at these settings, the bushy areas are the ones that are going to be a little bit more intensive for the 1660 Super to handle. But still, if you overclock it a little bit, and if you play with a 30 FPS lock as well as motion blur, I think you could actually have a somewhat decent experience. I wouldn't recommend it, obviously. If you're playing at 4K, just go for high settings. It got us near 60 FPS, right? So it's a much better experience, and here it's dropping into the 20s. But yeah, it's kind of surprising that it's doing so well. Alright guys, that's been it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Of course, I'm not going to test 8K Ultra. That's just stupid. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll be back very soon with another video. Thanks for watching. Love you all. Bye-bye.